Welcome back to the South African Morning. I'm Gareth Edwards. This is Marcel Gordon. Weather and sport for you a bit later. Now, many people go to bed hungry every day, and would you believe it, tons of food simply going to waste.
Indeed, the Food and Agriculture Organization says over 1.3 billion tons of food is lost or wasted each year. And that's a third of all food produced. Now, ShopRite says it's well aware of the social and environmental impact of food waste.
Yeah, well, let's find out what the big players are doing about this from a sustainability perspective. So it's only apt we have the Group Sustainability Manager of ShopRite, Sanjeev Raghubir, joining us here on the South African Morning. Sanjeev, good morning to you. I mean, the numbers that we're talking about as far as food wastage is concerned is staggering. I know people waste a lot of food, but when you look at those numbers, it's actually embarrassing.
Hi, good morning, Marcel. Good morning, Gareth. Yes, indeed. And we look at food waste not only at a retail or household level, but across the entire value chain. So if you look at food waste from farming to processing, manufacturing to preparing food, retailing, and finally to the household, it's a staggering number. And as you said, it can be potentially embarrassing. It has both environmental and social impacts. I mean, knowing full well what the impact of COVID has had in terms of food security, to think that a fair amount or a significant amount of food can be wasted is quite sinful.
Now, according to a statistic that I saw, we're looking at a small piece of the massive amount of food. I think the number we had earlier was a third of food produced that is wasted. A smaller percentage of that is actually wasted by consumers, which does that mean that the rest is wasted elsewhere on the value chain, as it were, elsewhere in the food ecosystem? Or where would yourself as a big retailer find itself in that? Because you're looking at the wastage of food, but then also there's issues around the sustainability and wastage around packaging as well.
Indeed. So you certainly have food waste across all parts of the value chain. As a retailer, we've adopted and implemented quite a few practices to reduce the amount of food waste in our stores. Firstly, it's around ordering and ranging so that we have the correct amount of food in our stores, while at the same time balancing that with the expectations of our customers so that they can have the products and the range that they want in the stores. In that process, one of the huge initiatives we embarked on is the donation of surplus food. So this is food that is still fit for human consumption, and instead of this food going onto landfills and being wasted, sometimes even as animal feed, we donate this to needy and beneficiary organizations or charities across the country. So just to give you a scale of that, Marcel, during the lockdown, we've donated close to 57 million rands worth of food to close to more than 350 beneficiary organizations or charities across the country.
Sanjeev, help me understand. I mean, they're obviously very impressive numbers, and you've obviously done the research as a major player in the cycle. But when you use the term from farm to fork, you've clearly thought about the whole, as Marcel said, the ecosystem. How do we try and educate consumers, whether it's through social media, whether it's labeling on the packages, just how easy it is to not be wasteful of food? I'm asking because I don't think people realize how much they're wasting and how much they're throwing away and what they could actually be doing with that. How do you take the lessons you've learned and pass that on to the consumer to try and learn from
And if I could add on to that, Sanjeev, before you answer that, there's also always the big question of those expiry dates on products as well.
Yeah, and that's such an important and critical topic or aspect in this discussion of food waste, because there's a fair amount of confusion on what is an expiry date, what is a best before date, and what is a use before date. You know, and I think it's potentially confusing to customers. Added to that, there's a fair amount of regulation or lack thereof that prevents retailers or brand owners from donating food that is, let's say, past its best before date. Now, I think there's a fair amount of effort needed to educate the wider consumer in terms of what is the difference between a best before, a use by, and an expiry date. Now, certainly an expiry date is the firm line where one shouldn't consume anything that it's past its expiry date. But best before suggests that one may not get, let's say, the sensory benefits of the product, but it's still fit for human consumption. And potentially the same with use by as well. But I think collectively, and I think that's the process with food waste, is that it's not only one player in the value chain that can make a difference, but it's everyone in the value chain across, from farm to fork, as you said, Gareth.
In terms of your research, obviously this really is a science. That's why you've got food scientists, people who are qualified to be able to tell you these are the products that will last the longest. This is and then you've got your consumer scientists saying during this month your consumers were eating a lot of butternut, not so much pumpkin, so order more of that and less of that and that kind of thing. Where is the wastage coming from? Where are we wasting food? Are consumers not creative enough to make sure they use up everything? And are stores perhaps getting their ordering wrong?
So you're correct in many ways. I think it's a scientific approach, but it's also a complex one, Marcel. In that some of it could be, one could think it's quite straightforward, but one has to balance, like we indicated, how much of stock is in the store, how we're able to satisfy the needs of customers, yet at the same time not overstock. So we have systems in place that allow us to forecast what our production should be, to forecast what our sales are going to be, and then systems to automatically determine what the replenishment levels in the stores are. So I think those are important factors, important parts to prevent food from being wasted in the first place. And then that food which is unavoidably, let's say, excess, then how do we donate that and how do we give that to people who are indeed facing issues around food security?
Just in closing, Sanjeev, your group is a co-signatory to South Africa's first food waste voluntary agreement. Can you tell us more about that? And do we have enough of the bigger players joining that and really putting their money where their mouths are?
Yeah, I think certainly. It's a collaborative platform. It's a collaborative agreement that was initiated by the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, together with the Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Environmental Affairs, supported by the European Union. It includes players from across the value chain, so farmers, manufacturers and brand owners, retailers, and even some consumer groups as well. And the whole idea there is that in a collaborative manner, we can look across the value chain, identify where the hotspots are, and then focus on those. There are certain products which are wasted, let's say, more than other products, but how do we change that and how do we address that? And I think that's the value and that's going to be the benefit of this voluntary agreement.
All right. Group Sustainability Manager Sanjeev Raghabir from ShopRite, our thanks to you this morning in speaking to us. And it just helps